If you struggle with beat block, you're not alone. Now, luckily, there are some solutions you can use, but the main problem we have with beat block is we open up our DAW, we start playing the same chord progression, we start hitting the same melodic notes, and we're like, wait, this beat sounds exactly the same as my last beat. Or we might add a kick and a snare. And even though we're creating something that's visually different, it starts to sound the same. It has the same sonics. So in this video, I'll show you little things to get outside of that box. Now, these little things are going to make huge changes. So let's switch to FL Studio. The first step, and I'll just kind of get to the easy stuff, is sampling. If you ever get stuck in your kind of ways and your routines or whatever, sample, because sampling takes different genres and you blend it into hip hop. So sampling could be a blues run where they're using a blues scale, or it could be, a chord progression, or it could be, there's 1,000 things they could be. Like, let's just go through some samples from J Dilla. We do have all these hip hop samples in our Discord. If you go to discord.gg/BusyWorksBeats, I'll leave the link below. We actually have a section with all the top classic hip hop samples from all the top records. So for example, this is Donuts by J Dilla, and I'm just going to listen to the music and pick up. It's like, when would I ever do in a beat? I would never do that because they're recording live horns. So a lot of the beat block comes from the fact that we're trying to get results from a computer that don't actually come from a computer. A lot of the music we love is organic, real instruments played into a DAW or played into a system, and then it's processed. So if we're not using real instruments, we're cutting out 90% of what we love, which is that organic sound. And that's our frustration with making beats in the DAW, is because nothing sounds like a real horn section. Nothing sounds like a real violin section. Nothing sounds like a real guitar. There's plugins to do half the stuff, but it does not sound like the real thing to that degree. Okay, we have vocal chants. In the first 2 seconds of this record, I have like a dramatic impact. Then we have the chant, call and response. That's two things I wouldn't usually do in a beat. So now I can extract these ideas. Not saying I have to use this exactly, but how do I create now, kind of like the Pharrell, and then you go into the beat. How do I create something that falls into the beat? Or how do I create a call and response? So even if I'm not using this record, I could learn from it to say, wow, I don't even use those elements in my creation. I'll kind of click a random record. I'm going to close my eyes, pick another record. When have I ever, and then just look at the song structure. When have I opened up the song with a bass? Never. I don't think I've ever opened up a beat with a bass. I mean, maybe a couple times. And then when do I play? Like, I have never made a beat with the bass, meaning like, I'm playing the bass as if they're drums. So those are the ideas I can extract from this record. And now I go into my record doing that same exact thing. You don't have to use a live bass per se, but hopefully you're grabbing the concept. Is now I'm going through all these records and looking at the DNA of the record and saying, what can I take creatively that they've done that I don't do? Funk guitar. I haven't used funk guitar in a long, long time. And then right into the beat. So now it's a drum fill going into the downbeat. All these little things will help you get out of your creative beat block, because again, the problem that we have is that the brain works off of the path of least resistance. And so our brain is just going to do whatever is the default. And if you don't challenge it, if you don't introduce new concepts, if you don't consciously seek to change something, it's not going to change. It's going to result to default, path of least resistance. And it's up to you what that path of least resistance is. But in this case, we have to forcibly go out and try to change the system. And so I know that was a little, based in principle and not necessarily a technique in the DAW, but that's what you have to do if you want different results. You have to change the way you go about things. You have to change the key. Now let's get into some technical in the DAW type stuff. Let's load up a plugin here. I'm trying to think of a plugin off the top of my head. Let's do Labs. Labs is completely free. If you don't know Labs, you can get to experiment with different sounds. Let's just do soft piano. So starting here, I would usually write 2-5-1, which is D minor. And I usually go for minor ninth chords. Okay, so I'm just going to show you what I would normally do and how I could change it. Okay, so that's our minor ninth. Then let's do a dominant ninth. We're going to do what's called a tritone substitution, but let's say you didn't know that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Normally it'd be written like this. And then we would write C major 9. Now, if you don't go to these advanced chord stamps, I recommend you try some of these chord stamps. Again, even writing music theory and knowing music theory, there are some chords that I just normally don't go to by default. And I would have to sit down and consciously practice those chords to fit them into my mix and know where to put them. And so the exercise you could do is simply go through this list and just listen to the chord types and listen to how they're structured and figure out what context can you place those chords. Now, let's say you didn't even know about a tritone substitution. This is where music theory knowledge comes into play. It's very hard to break outside the box when you don't even know the parameters of the box. You don't know the edge of the box. You don't know how big the box is. You don't know that the box is a cube. Okay, so you have to understand music theory to a degree, in my opinion. And that's why I made a whole course to make it easy for you. If you go to busyworksbeats.com/music theory magic, we have a new music theory course that goes over the magical elements of music that makes music move people, which is moving their emotions. That's the goal of music. Okay, so let's pull this down. 6 semitones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're revoicing the chord, it's called. And now we have a walk down process. Okay, now another thing we want to look at is just understanding the basics of music theory. Why does this sound good? It's because we have this dominant chord here, which has a diminished chord. And what makes this cool is this tritone right here. So it's 6 semitone distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is a special interval because it creates a pulling effect. So basically what I'm showing you is that you can create chord progressions now going throughout using this technique. And let's just make this a little less complex. Now what I want to do is create a secondary dominant. Now, a secondary dominant is when I want to land on a different ending chord. Let's say I want to land on A, for example. We're going to use the 5th of A and create a dominant chord at the 5th of A, and that will resolve down to A. I'm going to turn this up so you can hear. And that way you have two different endings, okay? But they still sound good because you're using what's called deceptive cadence. When you're going, usually we want to hear C, but then we end up on A minor, and that's called the relative minor scale. So music theory goes deep. It's not rules. It's really like, how do you flow through your music and make it creative? Let's make this a little more R&B-esque. I might revoice this chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, now you don't have to do the tritone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Tritone's really usually for a walk down process. In my opinion, this sounds cooler than the tritone. My ear went to hear B at the top. Also, when you want to get into less creative block, understand harmony. Harmony is the foundation for your melody. A lot of people skip over chords because they think, oh, chords are just for R&B. Chords are just for classic music. And in fact, if you study hip hop, chords not necessarily are always in the tracks, but understanding harmony from the chord can help you make a better melody. Making melody by itself, it just sounds thin and empty. When you have harmony, it sounds full and it gives the melody context. Okay, so let's add some melody. Another thing you could do if you get stuck with beat block is use counter melodies, things that go against. So for example, the chords are going pretty slow. So how do I go fast with my top line melody? And here's where you need to understand a little music theory, because we're going to move through intervals that just sound good, like perfect fifths. And then we'll do a perfect fifth of the perfect fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, you could do the same thing. I'm just going to copy the structure here. So it always will work. Now this could be played better with more expression. And here's the next step, is expressing. In FL Studio, we get in the habit of just drawing in notes and they all have the same velocity. What if I use this tool here called the Humanize script, and that will make the velocities more realistic and the timing more realistic, as if I'm playing this as an actual keyboard player, even if I don't have a MIDI controller yet. Okay, so these are ways to get outside of the box when you feel stuck. Because when you hear music the way it's normally played, you have ideas that normal musicians would have. When you play it like a computer would play it, you're like this, your brain isn't going to trigger the same way. Another thing, if you get stuck in beat block, is change the key. So let's hit shift down or shift up to change the key. Okay, so we're going to copy this, and I'm just going to change a small part. Instead of this, we're going to change that note. Now here, we're going to surprise the listener. Okay, I'm going to change this note. And this is where I'm going out of the key, but we're going to pull it back in key. And another thing here, I'll just keep it short, half steps. Okay, if you feel like you're stuck musically, music theory wise, like with the notes, add half steps. This is going out of the key on purpose and then pulling it back. So even though we're out of key, it sounds good. Because we resolve, it's called. I teach this in my music theory magic course, how to resolve your intervals and melody. Nextly is changing out the sound. So once you have the MIDI, let's change out the sound. Let's open up a contact bank. I made a whole plugin called Narcos. If you go to busyworksbeats.com/Narcos with a Z. Okay, I'll leave the link below. But basically, I sound designed with Jacob up in Canada, and we were at this secret place. And basically, this is sounds from rare synths and all types of stuff. So we placed it in our own libraries. So this one's called Narcos. And let's load up this one called Emotion, for example. Now I'm going to get different textures. It's a little high. Let's hit Control down to pull this down a notch. Might be a little too low. Let's pull it back. Okay, so now I can arrow through. Now that I have the actual music, I can now arrow through presets to get a different vibe. And now I can focus on the actual sound itself, tweaking it to make it sound cool. And this is the step that a lot of music producers skip because either they don't know how to do sound design, which is why I made this super simple to use. I just made it click and just change knobs as you're listening to your melody. Let's go back to the Emotion guitar. So let's add, for example, unison for like a chorusy effect. And let's go to the retro analog, turn this up. Now you can hear that bounce if I turn down unison for a sec. Retro analog pans the notes so that every other note pans a different way. And then you can mess with the arpeggiator if you want. Now the chords are moving pretty fast. So in this case, you would need a really fast arp. And when's the last time you used a 1/64th arp? Now, that's a little fast for a guitar, but you get the concept. Okay, now we can, again, once you have the sound, because we wrote in a stringed instrument like a piano, now that we have, the sound tweaked, now we can go to the effects and start processing this sound. Okay, so this is, how I would go about stepping out of the box. Let's use a free plugin here and let's slow down the melody. Now we're blending a slow down effect with this, a higher pitched. I'm going to switch this out for a bell. Okay. And another thing about Narcos, you can layer sound. So the cool part is, let me see if I know, like this layered by accident. So let's say I want to layer, create a unique vibe. Let's layer two different bells together. Now that bell is meant for more of a horror. Okay, and I can do different things to each preset. So now we're becoming more complex without changing the notes. And when you separate the process of sound like this, you become creative in each step. Not that every sound needs, all this creativity. Okay, so let's start messing with the effects. Okay, so now you can blend that in. So that's how you get out of beat block. It's that every structural thing that we're doing matters to the end result. What key we're in, what tempo we're in, what playing style we use. Are we using a MIDI controller? All these starting points can dictate the way we end the actual song. So if you want those free samples from Jay Dilla, Kanye West, who else? Dr. Dre, Scott Storch, you name it. All the classic hip hop samples, Wu-Tang is in there. Just go to our Discord. It's discord.gg/busyworksbeats. And if you want to learn the music theory stuff that I went through, just go to busyworksbeats.com/music theory magic. I'll see you guys. Peace.